I thought it'd be great if I stayed here until the baby is born, my half-sister declared, unexpectedly showing up at our door. Of course, that's a great idea. Stay as long as you need, my husband replied with a smile, not even glancing in my direction. I stood there, frozen in confusion, silently observing the exchange between Atlas and Raylan. Their closeness seemed more like that of lovers than family. Atlas, what's going on? I asked, my voice trembling. You're just jealous of your sweet little sister, he said with a smirk, brushing me off. Their chatter was starting to give me a headache, but as they walked hand in hand toward the bedroom, a cold wave of dread washed over me. I knew something was wrong. My name is Sienna Adams. I'm a 46-year-old housewife. Before marriage, I worked intensely, but that was over 20 years ago. Nowadays, I enjoy daily chores and sipping coffee. Just an ordinary middle-aged lady, but my hobby is investing. I've been doing it since before marriage. Recently, I've been earning significant dividends, treating myself to lavish hotel brunches and spa visits, leading a pretty elegant life. My husband Atlas is 40 years old, a salesman for a major company. He's gained quite a bit of weight, and frankly, he's been rather smelly lately. But he's good with words, given his profession. He may look big, but I love him. I felt he should probably lose some weight for health reasons, but he had this cute, mascot-like appeal, so I didn't see the need to force him into a diet. Atlas and I have a daughter, Rachel. She inherits Atlas's features. Slim, almost model-like in beauty, not just in appearance. She's academically top of her class and excels in sports, even making it to national competitions. She's also humble and works hard. It feels like we, the geese, gave birth to a swan. Both Atlas and I dote on Rachel, and we've often been told we're overprotective. Atlas has a bit of a weak spot for younger women, but he chose to marry an older woman like me and cherish our family. So I thought a little wandering gaze here and there was inevitable. We lived in a condo we bought around the time Rachel was born, but it was getting old, and they were considering raising the maintenance fees. Recently, amidst all this, Rachel decided to share an apartment near her college. At the same time, one of my relatives approached us about inheriting a now vacant house. Atlas and I decided to renovate that house and move there. But who could have known that this would cause issues between my husband and me, which had been smooth sailing up until then. The condo we had was a 4-bedroom, including a guest room, but the new house is just 2 bedrooms. The change was quite an adjustment, but we saw it as an opportunity to simplify our lives. One of the rooms, which serves as a study and a guest room, can be divided to make an additional room for Rachel if she ever comes back. Atlas started coming home late every night to work dinners and somehow always found reasons to go out, even on weekends. Sleeping next to him, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes when he came home, was unbearable for me. Even if we had separate beds, because of that, even though we originally shared a bedroom, I've been sleeping in the study ever since we moved. When it came time to send out moving announcements, I mailed letters to various places. Atlas isn't good with that sort of thing, so I took the initiative to send letters on his behalf to his family and relatives. As for me, since my parents have passed away, I simply wrote a brief note and sent it to friends and relatives on my mother's side. I haven't been in contact with any relatives from my father's side because of my half-sister, Raylan. Raylan is my half-sister, 14 years younger than me. When I was in 7th grade, my mother passed away, and about 6 months later, my father remarried. Raylan was already 2 years old when my father married his new wife, so at first, I assumed it was a blended family, with both of them bringing children into the marriage. About 5 years into their marriage, my father and his new wife were involved in an accident and never returned. At their funeral, relatives from my dad's side told me he and his new wife had been childhood friends, and everyone had always thought they would end up together. However, your mom set them up through her boss, and your dad felt he couldn't refuse, leaving his childhood friend out in the cold. To think that behind their smiles, my dad had a child with his second wife was a huge shock to me. Every time we had a family gathering, Raylan's favorite foods were served. She had brand-name clothes, got the biggest room all to herself, and if she said she wanted to go somewhere, they'd take her immediately. Meanwhile, I was burdened with all the chores, from preparing meals to doing laundry. I had to work part-time jobs, and all the money I earned was taken away. I also had a small storage room under the stairs, and I had to beg for even basic necessities. By the time Raylin was in elementary school, she had heard about my mom from the relatives and started looking down on me. I worked several part-time jobs to save money and finally moved out. It was impossible for me to harbor any positive feelings towards Raylin, and I never told her about my marriage or that I had a child. A few weeks after moving, I was having tea and relaxing when the doorbell rang. When I answered, a man's voice mumbled, "Delivery," and on the screen was a person looking down. I thought maybe Atlas had ordered something and opened the door, only to be left speechless. "Oh, Raylin, why are you here?" I asked, stunned. "Hi, sis." "Long time no see, just thought I'd drop by," Raylin said casually, wearing the hat I saw on the intercom. She wasn't a delivery person, but my half-sister. Without waiting for a response, she walked past me, entered the living room, and sat down on the couch. I followed her in a hurry, stood in front of her, and looked down. "I figured you wouldn't open the door if you knew it was me, so I used a recorded voice," Raylin said, smirking. "That's just low," I replied, my frustration rising. "Geez, you're scary," she mocked, feigning fear in an exaggerated way. However, it was clear she was just putting on a show, and the proof was that she had a smirk on her face. "I came for a visit," my sister said casually, her words as meaningless as ever. "Just go home." "I don't even want anything to do with you," I snapped, my voice cutting through the air with icy disdain. "Well, too bad. I already came here planning to stay with you," she replied, her grin as infuriating as her words. Raylan's audacious response only fueled my irritation further. Barely audible, I muttered under my breath, typical of a kleptomaniac's daughter, but the venom in my voice must have been clear enough. Her grin faltered and I felt my anger boil over. "Get out! I never want to see your face again," I shouted, my patience completely gone. "What's all the fuss about? People outside can hear you," Atlas said, entering the room. I was at a loss for words, surprised by his unexpected return at such an odd hour. As I struggled to explain, Raylan stood up and walked over to Atlas, intertwining her arm with his. Atlas didn't seem to mind. In fact, he looked quite pleased. "Oh, Atlas here," my sister chimed in sweetly. "Welcome, Raylan," Atlas said warmly. "My sister was being mean. I thought it'd be nice to stay with you until the baby is born. But is that okay?" Raylan added. "Of course. I'd be thrilled if you're okay with it. You can stay as long as you want," Atlas replied casually. I stood there in disbelief, silently observing the exchange between Atlas and Raylan. The intimacy they shared seemed more like that of lovers than mere siblings-in-law. "Atlas, what's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "You're just jealous of your cute little sister," he dismissed me, smirking. His words left me speechless, considering I had confided in him about my family situation before our marriage. "We have a spare bed in the guest room. You can stay there," Atlas offered casually. "Oh, that's so thoughtful of you," Raylan replied, quickly jumping at the chance. "But I'd feel much safer sharing a room with you instead." Their mushy conversation gave me a headache, and as they went to the bedroom arm in arm, I couldn't shake a bad feeling. Peeking into the room after several minutes, I discovered them embracing each other, living out what felt like a dream for Raylan. "The baby is thrilled too, living with Daddy," my sister exclaimed, dropping the bombshell that Atlas was the father. As they kissed, I watched through the crack in the door, tears streaming down my face. From that day on, they treated me like a housemaid. I complied, but silently began gathering evidence against them, contemplating divorce. One day, Raylan arrogantly demanded, "Leave the room. I need space. I'm a pregnant woman after all." The spiteful look on her face contradicted the gentleness usually associated with expectant mothers. I looked at Atlas for support. "Aren't you going to say something?" I asked him. "She's right," he said dismissively, siding with my sister. Any lingering feelings I had for him vanished. Still, a touch of sadness remained as Atlas happily took Raylan's hand, sealing my decision to leave. "I'll leave tomorrow," I declared firmly. Atlas's face lit up. "Great, maybe you can find somewhere else to stay tonight," he suggested casually. "This is now my and Raylan's home," he added with finality. I subtly nodded, leaving them to enjoy their laughter while they could. Stepping outside, A grin formed on my face as I contemplated what lay ahead. That night, I checked into a hotel, making plans for the next phase. The following day, I scheduled a moving company and headed to City Hall to start anew. Excitement and thoughts of newfound freedom kept me awake, but my spirit remained high. To my surprise, upon returning home, I found the moving company already confused as the house appeared empty. A small box with a note greeted me, containing some of my cherished belongings carelessly thrown in. Adding insult to injury, Atlas's wedding ring lay at the bottom of the box. Anger surged within me as I discovered the house in disarray, with evidence of Atlas and Raylan's escapades. I led the movers to pack their belongings, then found the note on the dining table. It announced Atlas and Raylan's 6-day trip abroad and requested the house be cleaned. The note mentioned that the divorce would be finalized upon their return. Atlas's utter self-centeredness left me dumbfounded, but his absence made executing my plan much easier. Secretly grateful that I had the movers pack all my belongings, I left Atlas's wedding ring on the kitchen counter before departing the house. After some contemplation, I purchased a place near Rachel's university, which happened to be on sale. The one-bedroom apartment was cozy, and I cherished the solitude it offered. On the day Atlas and Raylan were set to return, my phone incessantly rang. Without checking, I knew it was them. Answering with a nonchalant, "Hello," I was met with Atlas's frantic voice. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. Remaining calm, I replied, "What do you mean?" "What's going on?" "The house. It's gone. What did you do?" Bursting into laughter, I explained, "Well, it was my house, and if I'm not going to live there, why keep it?" "But we were living there, weren't we?" he retorted, furious. "Don't worry," I said smoothly. "Everything's safely stored in a storage unit. I'll text you the location and access code." "You can't do this," he yelled. "Bring back the house." I chuckled. "It was under my name, Atlas, and the money used to build it came from my investments, not a dime from you," I concluded. My husband seemed to recall his lack of involvement when the house was built, a fact he had conveniently forgotten. Claiming the baby to be his niece or nephew, Atlas pleaded, "You need to do something about the house. Raylan is in a tough spot." "I've known about your relationship since Raylan barged into our house," I responded calmly, added, "I've been collecting evidence, recordings from a high-end baby monitor. During one of her outbursts, Raylan mocked me. The monitor captured everything, even in complete darkness." Upon hearing this, Atlas was at a loss for words. Cheerfully, I continued, "The mailbox might have something for you." Atlas checked it, discovering certified mail. "What's this about?" he asked, visibly uncomfortable. "It's about the payment," I explained. "There's one for Raylan too." His plea to talk to his lawyer fell on deaf ears as I ended the call. A barrage of calls followed, which I ignored. My old phone, which I kept as evidence, wouldn't cause any problems as long as it was left untouched. After an hour of incessant calling, Atlas seemed to give up. The next morning, a relative from my father's side called on my new phone, likely having obtained the number from my sister. "You owe Raylan an apology," the relative demanded. "She's pregnant and deserves a new house as compensation." Unyielding, I refused. Apologize to the woman who had an affair with my husband? Never. If anyone owes an apology and compensation, it's Raylan, I retorted. The relative kept accusing me, but I stood my ground. Raylan's actions are just as disgraceful as her father's betrayal. Let her know to stay out of my life. Hanging up on the babbling relative, I felt the refreshing release of pent-up emotions. I contacted my lawyer, determined to bring Raylan and Atlas to justice. The thirst for revenge lingered until I witnessed the dumbfounded expressions on their faces during our discussion at the lawyer's office. My husband's mistress appeared utterly miffed, while Atlas wore a grumpy expression, showing no remorse. "Here are the divorce papers," I said, placing them in front of them. I then laid out another set, "And here's the marriage license. I'll reduce the compensation if you both sign it." Atlas snatched the pen without hesitation. "Fine," he muttered, scribbling his name. Raylan, smirking, followed suit, placing the signed documents in a folder. I gave them a big smile. "I'll submit these to the county office," I announced. Raylan, her expression suddenly dumbfounded, stammered, "Wait, What? I revealed. The divorce was finalized in mediation yesterday. Maybe you'd have known if you hadn't ignored multiple summonses. As Raylan and Atlas processed this information, I dropped another bombshell. Oh, and Atlas, there's a possibility you might want to deny the father-child relationship with the unborn child. Raylan's face went pale, while Atlas looked visibly shaken. Between compensation and child support for someone else's baby, I added with a shrug, I wish you both luck. Atlas then attempted to reconcile. What about Rachel? We should try to make this work for her, he said, suddenly changing his tune. Just then, the lawyer's office door swung open, and Rachel entered. Don't use me as an excuse, Dad, she said coldly, her harsh words leaving Atlas frozen in shock. Turning to me, Rachel added, I've made up my mind. I'm staying with Mom. Raylan, insulted by Rachel's blunt words, shook with rage as Rachel referred to her as that loose woman. Unable to respond, Raylan endured Rachel's verbal onslaught. I delivered the final blow. By the way, Atlas, I added smirking, you're broke? The house and the car? They're mine. Raylan's little scheme to extract money from me is officially a failure. Raylan stared at me, pale and stunned. As I left with my lawyer and Rachel, I left them to their newfound reality. That evening, I had dinner with Rachel for the first time in a while. It was delightful. I filed for divorce, and around the time Raylan's waiting period for remarriage had passed, Atlas and Raylan submitted their marriage license. The witness section bore my signature and that of Raylan's ex-husband, who had shared crucial information with me. News soon circulated. Atlas, caught misusing travel expenses for secret getaways with Raylan, was fired from his job and now struggled with part-time work. Raylan, taking care of the child, faced financial difficulties after being dumped by her boyfriend. Her attempt to sabotage my family had backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, Rachel enjoyed college life, and I led a relaxed life supported by stock dividends. Surprisingly, I had developed a closer bond with Raylan's ex-husband, who affectionately called me Sai. Recently, he reached out saying, "We need to talk. It's important." As I sat in front of my vanity, my face flushed like a smitten young woman. I couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and nervousness.